High above the surface of Earth, where the vacuum of space stretched infinitely in all directions, the Far Horizon Deep Space Observatory floated in the darkness. Nestled in orbit beyond the Moon, the station was one of humanity's most advanced outposts for scanning the cosmos. It was here, amid the hum of supercomputers and the glow of digital displays, that humanity's first glimpse into a larger universe truly began. Dr. Elias Mercer, a seasoned astrophysicist with sharp eyes and a sharper mind, sat hunched over his terminal. His workspace was cluttered with half-finished reports, coffee cups, and data drives, evidence of too many sleepless nights spent combing through signals from deep space. Beside him, his colleague, Dr. Lin Mei, tapped furiously at her keyboard, adjusting the sensitivity of their long-range radio telescopes. Most signals they received were mundane: pulsars, cosmic radiation, the occasional wandering comet reflecting light in odd ways. But tonight was different. A rhythmic pulse blinked on the screen, a structured pattern repeating at precise intervals. Elias squinted at the data stream scrolling across his monitor, his heartbeat quickening. "Lin, are you seeing this?" His voice was calm, but his fingers trembled slightly. Lin frowned, adjusting her headset. "I see it, and I don't like it." She leaned in closer. "It's too structured. No known natural phenomenon behaves like this." Elias ran a spectral analysis, his breath hitching when the results came back. This isn't just a pattern. It's a message." Lin exhaled sharply. "You're saying—" "Yes," Elias interrupted, nodding. "Someone, or something, out there is trying to talk to us." The room fell into a tense silence, broken only by the soft hum of machinery. They quickly forwarded the signal to their superiors, and within hours, the entire station was in an uproar. Calls were made, encrypted data was transmitted to Earth, and within a day, the world's top scientific minds and intelligence agencies were scrambling to decode the message. At first, skeptics dismissed it as a random anomaly, perhaps an unusual burst from a neutron star. But as experts across multiple institutions analyzed the data, one undeniable truth became clear. The signal was artificial. It was an invitation, and it had been waiting to be discovered. The world reacted as expected, with chaos and wonder in equal measure. Governments scrambled to take control of the discovery. News outlets caught wind of the encrypted leaks, and soon, theories ran rampant across the globe. Was it a warning? A trap? A simple beacon left behind by a long-dead civilization? Even the most cautious skeptics, those who had spent their careers debunking extraterrestrial claims, found themselves at a loss for words. Inside the halls of the United Nations Space Initiative, UNSI headquarters, representatives from the most powerful nations gathered behind closed doors. Security personnel lined the walls, their expressions unreadable, as scientists, military officials, and political leaders debated the next course of action. At the heart of the room, a massive holographic display projected the source of the message, a distant system near the galactic edge, far beyond any previous human exploration. The coordinates pointed to a lone celestial object orbiting a dim, aging star. Initial analysis suggested it was an artificial structure, possibly a space station. The air was thick with tension as the Joint Expedition Committee reviewed their options. "We cannot ignore this," argued Admiral Richard Gaines, a broad-shouldered man with graying hair and sharp eyes. "If this is an invitation, we need to answer it. If it's a trap, we need to know before it's too late." Dr. Helena Varos, one of the lead xenolinguists, folded her arms. "It doesn't read like a threat. There's no encoded aggression, no demands, just a signal repeating itself in mathematical sequences. It's waiting." "But waiting for what?" Ambassador Qasim Rahal asked, his voice even but firm. "A civilization that sends out a message like this, one that survives long enough for it to be received, either seeks contact or control." He gestured toward the hologram. "Are we prepared for either?" Silence settled over the room. Then, after hours of deliberation, the decision was made. Humanity would go. The mission would not be an act of blind optimism, nor one of fear. It would be a calculated approach, one led by scientists, but safeguarded by military oversight. The ISS Endeavour, a state-of-the-art interstellar vessel built for deep space research, would be prepared for the journey. Its crew would consist of scientists, linguists, engineers, and elite security personnel, each chosen for their ability to adapt to the unknown. And so, for the first time in human history, a crew was assembled not for conquest, not for war, but for an answer to a question as old as humanity itself. What or who was waiting for them among the stars? The ISS Endeavour loomed in the darkness of space, its sleek titanium hull reflecting the glow of Earth's upper atmosphere. Docked at the orbital assembly yard, the ship had originally been designed for deep space exploration, humanity's first true step beyond the solar system. But now it had been repurposed for a mission unlike any before. Inside the vast corridors of the Endeavour, final preparations were underway. Technicians in zero-gravity suits maneuvered between towering walls of equipment, running last-minute diagnostics. The ship's cryo-sleep chambers were being prepped, ensuring that the crew would survive the long voyage. Standing on the main observation deck, Captain Jonathan Keller stared at the vastness beyond the reinforced viewport. A veteran of Earth's first interstellar ventures, he had seen the frozen plains of Titan and the crimson storms of Jupiter's great red spot. But this was different. He turned at the sound of approaching footsteps. Commander Nadia Patel, his second-in-command, stopped beside him. She was shorter than him by a few inches, with sharp brown eyes that missed nothing. "Final systems check is complete," she reported. "Launch window aligns with the calculations. The crew is ready." Keller nodded, glancing back at the stars. "And Earth?" Patel exhaled. "Divided, as expected. Some fear we're walking into a trap. Others think we're throwing away resources, chasing ghosts. But the higher-ups are committed. We go." They both fell silent. There was no turning back now. The Endeavour's crew was a carefully selected mix of the best minds humanity had to offer. Among them was Dr. Elias Mercer, the astrophysicist whose team had first deciphered the alien message. Despite the excitement in his eyes, he carried the weight of responsibility. He knew that his discovery had set this course in motion. Beside him, Dr. Lin Mei finalized last-minute calculations with the ship's navigators. "If our estimates are correct," she murmured, "the object is orbiting a K-type main-sequence star. Dim, but stable. Not exactly the place you'd expect to find intelligent life. Maybe they didn't have a choice," Mercer mused. Further along the deck, Lieutenant Eric Vance, head of security, checked the ship's weapons systems. His team wasn't here to start a fight, but they had been briefed to expect the unexpected. "It's protocol," he reminded his team as they ran simulations. "First contact scenarios can go sideways fast. If it's a ghost station, fine. If it's not, we make sure humanity gets out of this alive." Elsewhere, Dr. Helena Veros, the linguist leading the diplomatic team, reviewed potential communication strategies. The message they had received had been clear, mathematical in nature. But what if that was the extent of the sender's ability to communicate? "We assume intelligence," she told her assistant. "But we don't assume intent. Not yet." As final checks were completed, the Endeavour prepared to leave Earth behind. Families sent their goodbyes over secure transmission channels. Some crew members tried to relax, knowing that once they left, they would not return for years, if ever. The ship's fusion drives ignited, sending a pulse of energy rippling through space. And then, in a burst of white light, the ISS Endeavour disappeared into the void, toward the unknown. The voyage was long, but the crew had trained for this. Cryo-sleep pods lined the lower decks, their occupants drifting in dreamless slumber as the ship's AI piloted them across the vast emptiness. Months passed in silence. The engines hummed steadily, guiding them toward their destination, a lone, artificial structure floating in the abyss. And then, as the ship's sensors detected their target, the crew was awakened. Alarms pulsed softly as cryo-sleep pods disengaged. One by one, the crew members gasped awake, their minds struggling to catch up with the lost time. Keller, still shaking off the effects of cryo, sat up in his pod. "Status report," he called out hoarsely. A voice crackled through the ship's intercom, the AI, designation Aegis. "Captain, we have arrived." Outside the ship's reinforced viewports, a station loomed against the darkness, silent, ancient, and waiting. The ISS Endeavour drifted toward the station, its thrusters firing in measured bursts, to adjust its trajectory. The object ahead of them hung in the void like a specter, a massive, dark structure orbiting the dim amber glow of a dying star. From a distance, it looked abandoned, a colossal ring-like construct, its surface scarred by impacts and the slow decay of time. Towers and spires jutted from its edges, some collapsed inward, others floating in jagged silence. No running lights, no signs of activity. Yet the signal was still broadcasting. The station was still waiting. Inside the ship's bridge, Captain Jonathan Keller sat rigid in his command chair, his eyes locked on the live feed from the forward cameras. Around him, the crew worked in quiet tension, their fingers moving over glowing console panels. "Scan for life signs," he ordered. Dr. Lin Mei, seated at the science station, ran a full spectral analysis. The results came back within seconds. "No biological readings," she said, frowning. "At least nothing recognizable. The station's structure is intact but shows no heat signatures beyond minimal energy output. It's functional, but barely." Lieutenant Eric Vance, the head of security, leaned forward. "Could be a trap. Someone could be waiting inside with everything powered down to avoid detection." Keller exhaled through his nose. "Or this could be exactly what it looks like. A relic of something long gone." Dr. Helena Veros studied the strange markings etched across the station's hull, visible now that the Endeavour had drawn closer. The symbols were not random. Patterns emerged, forming a language that had been left behind. She turned to Mercer, the scientist who had first deciphered the message. "These markings match elements of the transmission. If we decode this, we might get some answers before stepping inside." Mercer nodded, his fingers already working at the translation algorithm. The message was old. Centuries, perhaps even millennia old. The idea sent a chill through him. Whatever had built this place, whatever had sent that invitation, was long, long gone. The station's main docking bay was large enough to fit the Endeavour several times over, yet it lay silent, untouched. As the ship's automated systems latched onto the derelict structure, metallic clamps screeched in protest, their mechanisms sluggish from time and disrepair. The boarding team assembled in the airlock, their breath shallow inside their sealed helmets. They wore reinforced exosuits, each one equipped with oxygen reserves, built-in scanners, and if necessary, weapon systems. Keller, leading the team himself, held up his hand. "Final check. Comms, status?" "Comms online," Patel confirmed. "Readings. Stable," May added. Vance checked his sidearm. "No movement detected inside. If anything's waiting for us, it's playing dead." The airlock doors hissed open. Beyond them stretched a vast, empty chamber. Dim emergency lighting flickered along, the walls casting long, jagged shadows. Dust particles, or what they thought was dust, floated in the microgravity, disturbed by their entrance. Helmets sealed, the team stepped forward, their boots making soft thuds against the deck plating. The walls were adorned with faded inscriptions, the same language seen on the outer hull. Whoever had built this place had left behind more than just ruins. Helena Veros touched a nearby panel, brushing away layers of dust. "These symbols, they tell a story." "What kind of story?" Keller asked. She ran her gloved fingers over the markings, her voice hushed. "A warning." Further inside, the team found what appeared to be the station's control center. A circular chamber, vast and empty, its consoles dark and silent. At its center stood a massive holographic interface, unpowered for untold years. Mercer studied the controls. "We might be able to bring this online. The station still has minimal power." Patel hesitated. "And if doing that triggers something we don't want to wake up?" Keller gave her a steady look. "Then we handle it." With careful precision, Mercer activated a portable power relay. The moment he linked it to the station's interface, the room came alive. Lights flickered. The air filled with a low hum as ancient systems rebooted. The holographic projector crackled, then flared to life. A figure appeared, tall, humanoid in shape, but unmistakably alien. Its features were elongated, its form shimmering with distortion. And when it spoke, its voice carried a weight of centuries. "You have arrived at the last refuge of the Vari." The team froze. "If you can hear this message, We are gone. The voice, though artificial, held something close to sorrow. And if you are organic, then you are not alone. Beware the ones who ended us. Beware the Jarn Dominion. Silence followed. The hologram remained, flickering, waiting. Vance broke the quiet. We're in over our heads. Keller stared at the projection, his jaw tight. No, he said. We're exactly where we need to be. The realization settled over them like a weight. This wasn't just an invitation. It was a distress call from a civilization that no longer existed. The Vari had been wiped out, but their station had remained, broadcasting their final message across the stars. And now, humanity had answered. Mercer's voice was barely above a whisper. If they were wiped out, then who sent the message? Helena studied the flickering hologram. Maybe someone survived. Keller exhaled, forcing his mind to remain focused. The mission had changed. They had set out seeking first contact. But what they had found was the aftermath of a war. And according to the message, the war wasn't over. Somewhere in the darkness, the Jarn Dominion still remained. Waiting. Watching. Expanding. Keller turned to his team. We need to know what happened here, and we need to know fast. A heavy silence settled over the chamber. The flickering hologram of the Vari messenger stood motionless, frozen in its final transmission. Its words echoed in the minds of the crew, warning them of something they did not yet understand. The Jarn Dominion. The name carried weight, even though none of them had ever heard it before. Whoever the Vari had been, they had not only built this station, but they had fought and lost. Keller's voice broke the stillness. Aegis, record and analyze all available data from the transmission. I want a full linguistic breakdown. Acknowledged. Captain, the AI responded through their comms. Processing the message. Estimated completion, 17 minutes. 17 minutes felt like an eternity in an unknown place. Vance's grip on his rifle tightened as he scanned the chamber. His instincts screamed that something was wrong. I don't like this. No bodies, no debris, no evidence of a struggle. It's like they just vanished. Mercer was already at work, his hands gliding over the console as he bypassed security protocols that hadn't been touched in centuries. If they were at war, there has to be some kind of record. Tactical data, last communications, something. Helena Vero stood near the inscriptions on the wall, running her fingers across the worn, alien text. This station wasn't just a relay, she murmured. It was a warning beacon. The Vari wanted someone to find this. But why? A sudden beep from Mercer's console made everyone tense. The screen flickered as ancient data slowly decrypted. The hologram shifted, accessing primary records. A synthetic voice, different from the messenger, filled the chamber. Lines of alien text scrolled across the console, and then, images. A battle. Ships, enormous and unlike anything humanity had ever seen, clashed in the cold void of space. Sleek, Vari vessels, adorned with intricate patterns, fought against something darker. Hulking, jagged warships of an unknown design. Energy weapons flashed across the battlefield. The Vari's formations were precise, coordinated, almost artistic in their execution. And then, they collapsed. The Jarn ships swarmed them like predators, overwhelming them with sheer numbers and brute force. One by one, the Vari vessels fell, explosions blooming like dying stars. The feed cut to the surface of a planet. A Vari homeworld, perhaps. Towering spires and crystalline cities stood against a violet sky, only to be engulfed in fire as the enemy descended, and then the screen went dark. Final transmission logged, date unknown. The Vari have fallen. Mercer exhaled sharply. This was a massacre. Patel took a step closer, her voice hushed. And we just announced ourselves to whoever did it. The words hit them hard. For all their technological advancements, humanity had only just begun to understand the vastness of the galaxy. The Vari had been ahead of them, far ahead. And yet, they had fallen. Helena swallowed. If the Jarn are still out there, If they receive this signal, we have to shut it down, Keller said immediately. But Mercer hesitated. Wait. Think about this. If we turn it off, we erase the last remnants of a species. This beacon may be the only evidence they ever existed. The only story left to tell. Keller's jaw tightened. He understood the weight of Mercer's words, but the risk was too great. If we leave it on, we could be inviting the same thing that wiped them out. Do you really want to bet that the Jarn are gone? A soft mechanical click interrupted them. The room darkened. The hologram flickered again, but this time, the Vari messenger's form shifted. The static-ridden figure raised its head, as if suddenly aware of their presence. And then it moved. You are not Vari, it said, its voice crackling but unmistakably sentient. The team froze. Your biosigns are unknown. Your language fragmented. Identify! Vance's grip tightened on his weapon. Is this a recording? Helena's breath caught in her throat. No, she whispered. This is an AI. Keller stepped forward, keeping his voice steady. We are explorers. Humans. From a distant star. The hologram seemed to process his words. Human, unknown designation. Carbon-based, pattern irregular, probability of survival against Jarn. It hesitated. Uncertain, the way it said the last word sent a chill through them. Mercer, still at the console, whispered, This thing is analyzing us. The Vari AI flickered, its form stabilizing slightly. You have accessed restricted archives. The Jarn do not negotiate. They do not listen. They do not leave survivors. Keller clenched his fists. Then why send the signal? The AI seemed to hesitate again. Then it answered. Because you are not Vari, and you are not Jarn. Silence. Helena's mind raced. You sent this, hoping for someone else, someone new. Affirmative. The AI's voice softened, barely above a whisper. A warning, but also a hope. The Vari failed. Perhaps you will not. The chamber's lights dimmed further. A deep vibration rumbled beneath their feet. Mercer's eyes widened. We're triggering something. The AI's holographic form flickered, and its voice dropped into a more urgent tone. If you are to survive, you must leave now. Keller's blood ran cold. Why? The AI's face became still. Because they heard you. Every hair on Keller's body stood on end. Who? The chamber shuddered as alarms blared. Jarn forces detected. The station's long-dormant defense systems flared to life, warning sirens screaming in an alien tongue. The ancient mechanisms, rusted and failing, were trying to activate shields that no longer worked. Patel grabbed Keller's arm. Sir, we have incoming, Vance cursed. We need to get the hell out of here now! Keller turned to Mercer. Shut it down! Disable the beacon! Mercer worked frantically, his fingers flying across the console. But it was too late. The station's power grid surged, broadcasting their location into the void. And somewhere in the cold darkness of space, something answered. The Endeavor's proximity alarms wailed like a dying animal, their shrill cries reverberating through the ship's metal hull. Lights flickered as the station's ancient systems clashed with the more modern human technology interfacing with them. On board the bridge, Lieutenant Erica Vance's hands moved swiftly across the tactical console, trying to make sense of the incoming threat. Multiple contacts, she reported, her voice clipped with tension. Emerging from FTL, Vector 090 by 315. Keller's face was stone as he stared at the holographic display, where 3 massive ships had just appeared at the edge of the system. Their silhouettes were unlike anything in the human database. Long, jagged forms, asymmetrical and ominous, almost predatory in design. They seemed less like vessels, and more like the exoskeletons of some massive, long-dead creature. Their surfaces layered in interwoven chitinous plating that absorbed light rather than reflected it. Them, Patel breathed. It's the Jarn. In the derelict station, still inside the control room, Mercer's fingers flew across the console, overriding the beacon's systems. I'm trying to shut it down, he barked. But the station's AI isn't responding. Hell, I think it's locked itself out too. Helen Navarro spun toward the flickering Vari hologram. You warned us, she snapped. Now help us. The AI's expression did not change, but its voice carried an eerie calm. You must go. The Endeavor can't jump while we're still tethered, Vance growled. If those things get any closer, we're sitting ducks. Keller activated his comm. Endeavor, prepare emergency undocking. We need to... The Jarn ships moved. They did not accelerate in the conventional sense. There was no graceful buildup of speed, no smooth propulsion. They simply shifted, as if space itself had folded around them, and suddenly they were closer. The Endeavor's sensors scrambled to keep up, unable to predict their movement patterns. The first energy spike registered, then the second. They're powering weapons, Patel yelled. A heartbeat later, a beam of pure violet light lanced through the void, smashing into the station's outer hull. The entire construct lurched, metal screaming as ancient supports buckled under the sheer force of the impact. Inside, the control chamber shook violently. Debris rained from the ceiling. Consoles overloaded, sparking in a cascade of blue fire. Mercer was thrown back, hitting the ground hard. Keller caught himself against a railing, his breath coming fast. We're out of time. Move. The team sprinted through the station's deteriorating corridors, their boots slamming against the metal floor. Gravity was failing. Sections of the hallway flickered between microgravity and crushing force. We can't take the direct route, Patel shouted. The main docking bay is exposed. One more hit, and it'll depressurize. Helena checked her wrist display, pulling up the schematics they had downloaded earlier. There's an auxiliary airlock on the lower level, she called. It should lead to the maintenance tunnels, less risk of hull breach. Keller didn't hesitate. Then that's our exit. Move. Behind them, the station groaned. Another blast from the Jarn ships, shearing off an entire section of the outer ring. The structure was collapsing under its own weight. The team leaped across a gap in the deck plating where a rupture had torn through, using their suit thrusters to navigate. They landed hard on the other side, panting, just as a support beam snapped free, crashing down where they had stood moments before. Thing's coming apart, Vance shouted. Mercer scrambled toward the airlock controls, overriding the decayed systems. With a final hiss, the doors slid open, revealing a cramped tunnel leading toward the station's lower sector. Go, go, go! One by one, they filed. In, the bulkhead ceiling behind them. On the Endeavor, chaos had erupted. The Jarn ships were circling, their movements erratic, unnatural. Every time the human vessel tried to get a targeting lock, the enemy simply wasn't there anymore. Shields at 60%, Chief Engineer Yaracade's voice rang over the comms. We can't take many more hits like that, Vance's voice crackled in. We're almost to the docking bay. Prep for immediate departure. Keller's boots barely hit the deck before he shouted, Helm, get us out of here! Emergency burn, now! The Endeavor's thrusters roared to life, pulling away from the crumbling Vari station. Behind them, the Jarn ships did not pursue immediately. They remained in orbit, almost as if watching, studying. And then, energy spike, Patel cried out. There! A pulse erupted from the lead Jarn vessel, expanding outward like a tidal wave. It was not an attack. It was a signal. The Vari station, what was left of it, answered. Lights flickered on across the dying structure, hundreds of them. Mercer's stomach twisted. Oh no. A tremor rippled through the station's remains. Something was waking up. Helena's breath caught as she stared out the viewport. They weren't just listening, she whispered. They were waiting. The Endeavor's engines flared, burning toward the system's outer edge, but the Jarn ships did not follow. They had no reason to. Because now something else had returned. Something that had not been truly dead. Something that had been left behind by the Vari. And as the Endeavor jumped into FTL, leaving the battle behind, one final transmission was intercepted. A single phrase, in a language that should have been long forgotten. The war resumes. The Endeavor hurtled through the abyss, its engines straining against the void as it pushed for the nearest FTL window. Every second counted. Behind them, the remains of the Vari station smoldered, its jagged silhouette flickering against the backdrop of a distant sun. But the station wasn't dead. Not anymore. Keller gripped the armrest of his command chair, staring at the tactical display as data streamed in from their rapidly retreating sensors. The Jarn ships had not pursued, not in the way they expected. Instead, they remained in formation, looming near the station's remains like silent sentinels. Something was keeping them there. Something older than them. "Aegis," Keller barked. "Run a full analysis of that transmission." "Processing," the AI intoned, its synthetic voice eerily calm amid the chaos. A moment later, the bridge lights flickered as an ancient voice echoed through the ship's comms. It was unlike the cold, emotionless tones of the Vari AI. This was organic, resonant, like the ghost of something long forgotten. "The war resumes." A chill settled over the bridge. Vance, still catching her breath from the sprint to the ship, exchanged a glance with Patel. "What the hell does that mean?" Helena was already running through the data on her screen, her fingers moving like lightning. That message wasn't just a warning, it was a declaration. She exhaled, sharply. Something on that station woke up. Keller's jaw tightened. What kind of something? Before she could answer, Mercer swore under his breath. "Got something on the sensors. Before we jumped, our system logged. A power surge from the station." He swallowed. But not just the beacon. The screen flickered, and a new set of readings appeared. Keller stared. "That's impossible." Because the data was unmistakable. The station wasn't just sending a signal. It was activating something. And the Jarn weren't stopping it. The Vari had lost their war. That much was obvious. But what if losing wasn't the same as surrendering? Deep within the station, beyond the crumbling corridors and long-dead systems, something ancient and vast had stirred. It had been asleep, entombed within layers of inactive machinery, locked behind fail-safes that had only now been lifted. The Jarn ships remained still, orbiting like predators waiting for prey to emerge. They knew what was about to happen. They had seen it before, and now, after centuries of silence, the final battle of a dead war was about to restart. The Endeavor burned through the void, FTL drives humming as they pushed further away from the station's position. But distance alone wasn't enough, because now, humanity was part of this story. On the bridge, Patel ran a final decryption scan on the beacon's logs. One last message, buried beneath layers of security, emerged from the data. A hologram flickered to life in the center of the command deck. This time, it wasn't the AI. It was a Vari. Their form was translucent, faint blue light tracing the delicate features of their tall, slender frame. Their eyes, black pools of depthless understanding, focused on Keller. "If you have found this message," the Vari figure said, "then we have failed." The weight of those words settled on the crew like a lead weight. The Jarn cannot be negotiated with. They are not conquerors. They do not seek resources or territory. They seek one thing only, the eradication of all who are not them. The hologram shifted slightly, as if reacting to their presence. "But if you are hearing this, then you are something new." A pause, a moment of stillness, and perhaps you will succeed where we could not. The image flickered out. Silence. Nobody spoke for several seconds. Then Patel whispered, They left something behind. A weapon?" Helena shook her head. "Not just a weapon. A last act of defiance." Keller exhaled slowly. "And we woke it up." Mercer ran a hand through his hair, eyes still locked on the dead hologram. "So what do we do?" Vance's voice was grim. "We decide what kind of species we're going to be. Because the Vari had given humanity a choice. Turn away. Flee. Forget what they had seen. Or stand, like the Vari once had." The Jarn were still waiting, and, for the first time in centuries, the war had resumed.